By The Way to My Heart Incorporated.
Welcome to the Heart of Innovation. 60 minutes that could save life and limb, with new breakthrough ideas and innovation changing the healthcare landscape. Brought to you by patient advocacy group thewaytomyheart.org in partnership with Abbott. Here are your hosts for the Heart of Innovation, Emmy award-winning journalist and founder of The Way to My Heart, Kim McNicholas, and interventional cardiologist and founder of the Save My Piggies Health Education Series, Dr. John Phillips.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. We have a very concerning epidemic that is going global, and it's called diabetes. I'm sure you've heard this before, but did you know that more than 50% of American adults alone have at least pre-diabetes or diabetes? And even more concerning is a study that came out recently in Science Direct, a journal, suggested that there are more patients that are younger, between the ages of 18 and 24, that are actually getting amputated for an advanced form of critical limb ischemia. It is actually called critical limb ischemia. It's an advanced form of P.A.D, which is blocked arteries in the legs, and it's a complication of diabetes. Too many extra sugar molecules sitting there in the bloodstream scratches the arteries, leads to atherosclerosis. It is a huge problem. And so it used to be an old person's disease, being peripheral artery disease, is now getting younger and younger, and it's all because of diabetes. And so in this show, we are dedicating the entire hour to talking about potential advances in care for diabetes to hopefully put a stop to this epidemic. We have Dr. David Alper there. He is a board member for the Global P.A.D. Association. We also have Salih Hendricks. He is a patient advocate or global patient advocate for the Global P.A.D. Association. They're both going to be live in Orlando, Florida, where the American Diabetes Association is holding its annual scientific sessions. And we're going to get to them in just a moment. But first, we are going to welcome back Dr. John Phillips, straight from Maui, getting a little bit of sunshine, taking a break from saving those piggies. Are you feeling pretty rested?
Honestly, no. And I'll tell you why. I've never, I was thinking about this as I'm in Columbus. So we flew to Maui, which is 6 hours behind me Eastern time. And I'm thinking, how much further behind can I get? Because I'm so used to going ahead. And at any rate, the international date line's not too further west there on the Pacific. But I think 6 hours, maybe, I don't know if you can go 7 hours, but at any rate, that's about
I don't
as far
know.
behind.
Australia, maybe South Africa. We'll have to talk to Salih Hendricks
That's
about that.
I mean,
coming
that,
up.
when I came back from South Africa 2 years ago, we were 9.5 hours ahead, I think. At any rate, I get back last week on Sunday and I felt okay, but I have not. Last night was the first decent, nice sleep I've had, listen to me complain, right? But at any rate, we had a really nice time. Maui, I don't know if you've ever been there. Wonderful, beautiful area. We stayed in Lahaina, which is where the fires were, which is really devastating to see the loss of homes and cars and 100 and some odd lives. It's just really, really sad, but beautiful place. Did a lot of fun stuff. And
I heard they're really doing a great job rebuilding. They're really coming back. They're showing their resilience.
Yeah, they certainly are. What little I know about it, I believe they're having some issues with funding. A lot of the homes that burned, as I understand it, were fairly low income housing. And I think there is a little bit of a concern about outside developers maybe coming in and changing that kind of portfolio, so to speak. But I didn't realize their harbor burned too. So they lost all these boats. It's crazy what happened there. And if I also remember correctly, I think it was one of the largest number of deaths in a wildfire in the U.S. in a really long time. So certainly they need our support.
And even worse is they have a very high diabetic rate there as well across the islands. And that is very concerning, especially with now them having even greater shortages, of food and having to depend more on their famous spam, things in a can, things that are processed, in order to thrive and survive. And don't tell me you had a spam sushi there, did you? Did you go to the local,
I
what
did.
was it, the dollar shop? I forget what they're called there. They're
The,
little
the
AM,
AB,
PM style things.
yeah, the
ABC stores.
ABC stores.
Yes.
Yep, yep.
You didn't. Did you
We
have
did
a spam in one of those little
yeah, right. It's like
heated
I did.
containers?
I had to try it.
You did.
Well, so the spam came about because of World War II when they had all these
Right.
guys in the Pacific and they didn't know how to like maintain protein meals without
Yeah.
them. There's no refrigeration. So I don't know.
Nope.
Evidently it's not bad, but I don't know that I'd buy it regularly.
No, but when you're depending on it, it becomes just part of the culture there. And that's what I'm hearing from doctors there. Thank goodness we do have, I call him, it's Dr. Ammer. He has a cath lab that's over on the main island. And he's now, because of the diabetes epidemic across the islands and the newly, just emergence of advanced cases of blocked arteries in the legs. He's now expanding across all of the islands to provide more advanced care. And as you know, with people who are diabetic, they usually get these blocked arteries in those smaller vessels below the knee and into the foot, which are much tougher to get. And you have to have a lot of finesse, a truly advanced skill set, such as what you have, Dr. Phillips. And he has as well. And he's developing a team over there to be able to provide this advanced care for those smaller vessels that are in the calf and in the foot that are really tough to get to, that diabetics truly experience.
Yeah, it's of course, get thrown right back into the fire. And this is an interesting thing that happened to me. It hasn't happened in a while, but there was a gentleman that who was either staring down a below the knee amputation. He wasn't a candidate for bypass, so we ended up reconstructing a bunch of vessels below the knee. And there's complications that it can ensue, but the arteries were so calcified and like basically turned to bone. We had a little hole in the artery, and that caused the pressure in the compartments in the legs to swell. So he had to go to surgery. I think we're going to be able to save his leg, but it's just one of these things that these folks are so sick and they're teetering on, the verge of complete like metabolic and physical collapse, that they do not have. Their runway is very short. And the diabetes, poor gentleman, I think really controlled diabetic. It's just, I'm glad we're having this conversation. We've talked about diabetes before, but I can't wait to hear what the team in Orlando has in store for us with respect to what's going on down there with the ADA national meeting.
So I think I'd like to jump to it. So I think we should go to break a little bit early, and let's come back and bring in Dr. David Alper and our patient advocate, global patient advocate, Salih Hendricks, who are live at the American Diabetes Association's scientific sessions. And we're going to hear what's new and what's next coming up right here on KDOW. So stay with us.
AM 1220 KDOW.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Before we jump into what is going to be a very stimulating conversation about the epidemic of diabetes, Kim, I think we have a chance for a little bit of a moment of inspiration. Is that okay?
Always.
Dr. John
Yes, we do.
Phillips, spectacular, vascular moment of inspiration.
I've missed that.
Me too. I have missed that as well. So I thought to myself, okay, I just got back from Maui. Who lives in Maui that has, or at least calls Maui a second home? A lot of people, Oprah and Jeff Bezos, but Clint Eastwood has a house in Maui. And I was like, let's get some interesting Clint Eastwood quotes, Dirty Harry, all that good stuff. But I kind of like this one because I think the purpose to some degree of the this meeting is to enact change, and sometimes the change has to come from within. So Clint Eastwood is quoted as saying, sometimes if you want to see a change for the better, you have to take things into your own hands. So there you go.
Oh, I think that is completely. And I see, Dr. David Alper, we're going to bring you in right away. And I see Salih Hendricks live from the American Diabetes Association's annual scientific sessions, and they're nodding. I think that they 100% agree. Don't you, David Alper?
Well, I mean, change is exactly what's underneath any type of care with diabetes. Obviously, it's a lifestyle affecting disease. People lead themselves up to it. Nobody asks for diabetes, of course. Very often it's inherited, but it's the
Right.
result of a lifestyle. And so we can throw pills at it, we can throw tests at it, we can throw equipment at it. And if you're going to still sit down and plow through a box of Twinkies one night, you're going to have diabetic problems and you're going to be led to things like CLI, PAD, amputation, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. It really goes to that quote that he's talking about, that
Mhm.
there's so much that people can do on their own. I mean, unless you have type 1 diabetes, that's a little bit harder to get a handle on. There's so much that you have to do to be reliant upon medication and managing that medication. And especially for low income people, I just met someone last night that was saying with his insurance, he's really struggling with getting his diabetes under control and getting the right insulin for his body and his presentation of disease. And so, as much as you want to say, yes, there is a lot you can do that is within your control, especially when it comes to food and exercise. But medication is becoming a little bit more of a struggle. And I think that that's something that I see Salih Hendricks nodding his head, especially you came into this meeting from South Africa, and that is probably something that you were trying to address there at the meeting with some powers that be, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, definitely. It is something that I can actually coming here, okay, and even speaking to Dr. Alper just a few minutes ago, um, questions which I had buried in my mind for years was actually answered in less than 15 minutes.
Wow.
For me, I'm satisfied. The other thing is about the sessions which I've actually gone to so far. The topic in every session, AI. And for me, there is new developments, but how can AI take over in data collection? Well, it could. But the thing is, there was an app which, for the screening of diabetes. So it is scientific, but for me as a diabetic for 42 years, I mean, I'm sitting next to Dr. Alper here, and John is on the other side there. But how can AI take things forward to for data collection? Yes, but there was two sessions which I don't think any lived experience was actually impressed about on AI taking over screening, diagnosis, and things because of data collection. So it's impressive, but for me as a lived experience and all of us in that session, we had so many questions, but they had answers. And it was more of a marketing strategy in a way of that if I want to be tested, I want Dr. Alper or John on the other side to check me out, not actually look at that. That's going to detect what type of screening you need, or if you're diabetic, your sugars are high and things. I want a doctor tell me, not an app. I mean,
Right.
I don't know, I don't know what John has in mind, but for me, I want my doctor.
Well, I'll just comment on that. And I think AI, I don't know a ton about AI. I mean, obviously, sometimes we use ChatGPT to form an email or something for us, but clearly there are very powerful kind of forces there that can change how we, diagnose and screen and treat people. But at the end of the day, and I always disclaimer, this is my opinion. At the end of the day, so people who don't have type 1 diabetes, right? So type 1 diabetes, they just don't make insulin. That's not their fault. But those people that are pre-diabetic, I think a third of all folks in the United States are pre-diabetic, meaning they have a sugar in their blood sugar levels are at that point where they're going to develop diabetes if they don't change their ways. We have to change our ways. We have to change how we eat. and we kind of off air, we're talking about all the processed foods that we eat with the the added sugars. We have to change how we eat, and we have to exercise, and you have to be proactive. We are too reactive in how we treat patients. I see it every day. I'm reactive with someone's having a heart attack or blocked leg artery. We have to be proactive, and I hope what's going on down there in Florida, at least there's some thoughts of let's be proactive, but the patient has to buy into making change, like we talked about in that quote. The patient,
Yeah.
it rests on the patient's shoulders, in my opinion.
Well, you're 100% correct, John. And
Whoops, we might have had a little bit of a
A little glitchy there.
delay and technology there, and it's just when we have that amazing
I know,
insight from
exactly.
Dr. David Alper. It's like, oh no, we're frozen, we're gone. But I'm sure they'll be back in a
Yeah.
moment. And I just want to say, in terms of AI, I think that AI is just being thrown around as a marketing ploy. And I'm concerned. I think it will benefit so many patients and increase the number of patients getting diagnosed, because I think it is the diagnosis. I think that is something that can be streamlined through AI and getting people just moving through. Great. But and also to detect who might be at risk and to get them in and to encourage them to go. Everything can be automated. But I think that there's still a lot to be said for when you're sick or when you're not feeling good or when you have something going on. You don't want technology to be interacting with you. We see it still all the time, when it comes to the portals that now patients have access to when they get their test results before they see the doctor. You and I have talked about this before. How many times have you had a patient sit there and tell you that, you know what, I got my test results 2 weeks ago. I couldn't get in for a consult with you to discuss the results till 2 weeks later, till today. And I have literally not had a good night's sleep because I Dr. Googled it. And with Dr. Google, with AI, those technologies are only as good as what's being fed into them. So a lot of the information is no different than what people are getting already.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I think it could lead to even greater fear going forward
Well,
without the human touch.
I mean, we've got about a minute left before we go to break, and clearly we'll touch on or continue this conversation. But I had a lovely patient of mine this yesterday, and she, there's I think probably I'm guessing about maybe 10% of people are kind of those that are in their chart reading their CAT scan reports and all these things, and it's in a language that they don't speak, and then that kind of triggers. And so maybe I don't know, maybe AI, and we're getting off topic a little bit, but can help decipher some of these words that they're hearing. But at the end of the day, the patient and the physician need to interact. The patient is the coach, patient, and the physician's the coach, patient's the quarterback or whatever, and the patient has to enact the change. We can help them as much as possible, but they have to move that boulder up the hill.
we are telling patients they need to own their disease, is what it
Yep.
comes down to. And the minute that they do, then we have a partner, and then we can beat this thing together. It's just as simple as that, unless we're going to move in and live with them 24/7.
And that's where I do think that AI, can really help. And they can help to decipher things, but they can't diagnose. I don't ever want to see AI diagnosing, because especially when it comes to peripheral artery disease, it's not just the test results, it's also the presentation of symptoms and the entire lived experience that Salih was talking about. We're going to have more. I hear the music ending. We got to go to break. We'll have more with Dr. David Alper and Salih Hendricks live from the American Diabetes Association scientific session. So stay with us. That's next.
1220 KDOW.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. What I'd like to do, with your blessing, Kim, is get right back to Salih and David. They're at the American Diabetes Association meeting, over 10,000 people in Orlando.
Yep.
Salih, you traveled all the way from South Africa to come to this meeting. What are, if you can, let's say 3 things that you have listened to, or poster presentation, whatever that you've seen, that you're gonna bring back to South Africa, that will expand your knowledge? You've been diabetic for 42 years. What are you gonna take away from this meeting?
From this meeting, it's hard to say this, but coming from South Africa and learning in 2 to 3 days the amount of improvement in technology in diabetes, and going back to South Africa and actually putting the advocacy world of questions at ease on what is being developed, what is accessible to us, and what is accessible here in the USA and Europe.
Do you find it very
And
frustrating for you sitting there and realizing what may be more possible here in the States or even in the UK versus in South Africa, and go, seriously,
yeah,
we know it's out there, but I can't have it?
yeah. And like I say, the questions that I asked Albert, in that 15 minutes has answered so many unanswered questions that if you ask the physicians in South Africa, okay, it's not that they're not knowledgeable, but it is the satisfaction that the patient wants with questions asked.
So give us an
And it's
example give us an example of one question that you had that they answered for you in a minute or whatever it was.
the question that I asked Dr. Alper, okay, when does the onset of complications start?
Mm.
And in a
Good
David?
question.
simple way that Dr. Alper actually answered me, it could happen from the very start of your diabetes, in simple terms. It's not an onset of, it's age related. No. It could be from the onset of your diagnosis. And this is the question that I ask so many physicians, which they will say that type 2, it will start at a different age. The amputations, the diagnosis of diabetes type 2, with all my research that I'm doing, has got no age limit.
Right.
So for me, every question and everything that I've actually wanted was answered in 15 minutes. And I'm happy. I'm satisfied. Being here at ADA, I was invited, and it's an overflow, overwhelming knowledge. I've got no more words.
Yeah, and
Just
what were some of the key takeaways, Dr. Alper? Because you definitely are a presenter. You've been involved in the higher level meetings as well. What are some of the things you're most excited about taking away from this meeting?
Well, first and foremost, ADA has recognized finally that obesity is becoming an epidemic in this country, which is leading to things like you were talking about earlier, Kim, with teenagers suddenly developing catastrophic signs and symptoms of diabetes. So we are actually forming an obesity committee to address obesity issues, lifestyle issues, to hit hard against people with type 2, against the folks with pre-diabetes, so that we can help them along with that. And to Sally's point, get to them before the conference center. That is the first thing. The second big thing that's ticking up here is to raise the level of the diabetic nurse educators, of the secondary providers, who very often have the patient time and the patient faces to really educate. We all know that you got that 6-minute doctor visit nowadays. No offense, John. And so the amount of time that they have to get in there, physicians nowadays deal with your acute issues, but the chronic issues is where the doctor support team comes in. And so more and more, we're making sure that these folks have the tools, have the education to really impart it on the patients and allow the patients to help themselves. The third big issue, I just sat through a 2-hour meeting on this, is health disparities, the inequity of availability of healthcare in America. Salih talks about the fact that it's hard to sit in South Africa and see what we have in America. Imagine sitting in Alabama or Mississippi, knowing what's available 30 miles over and not being able to have it. because you can't afford it, because the doctors are 40, 50, 60 miles away, and it's a 3-hour round trip for a dialysis. We're starting to recognize this more, that in this country, we need to get more equity in the availability of health, that we shouldn't be able to tell whether you get care or not, depending upon the zip code you live in. And so
Right.
these are the type of non-medical conversations, but diabetes care conversations that we're having here as well.
There's a couple of points that you hit on, and I'd like to, if we can, address them one by one. And they all go hand in hand, right? But so let's talk about obesity. You have a number of individuals, probably in the millions of Americans, who do not exercise regularly, and they may or may not see the benefit of it. But regardless, they don't do that. Plus, the food that they eat is horrifically bad for them.
Yep.
Because a lot of them can't afford fresh fruits and vegetables. I mean, inflation, all these other things. So what is the ADA, in your opinion, doing how do you curb this epidemic of obesity in the United States? I mean, when you travel outside the US, people aren't they're not as obese as we are. I think it's because we're mobile and we don't eat right. How do you fix that? I know you can't fix that in like one sentence, but I mean, what do you
no.
Well, if anyone
I mean,
can
good.
fix
That'd be
it,
great,
Dr.
David.
David Alper can.
Well, I mean, John, you're right. You've got the Mediterranean diet, Greece, Italy, etc., where they're eating fresh vegetables, fruits. It's available. It's part of their culture. Here, one of the things ADA is doing is partnering with these charitable organizations that are actually gathering up food that normally goes to waste and making it available to the communities. We just heard about over 15 million pounds of food being dispersed through Ohio by one of these charitable organizations of people that just got together, ordinary people, and said, we've got to be able to get this food to people as opposed to a landfill, and they need it. And you're absolutely right. Exercise is another story. That's a lifestyle change. That's something AI is not going to change. That's somebody teaching people to, again, own their disease.
Right.
You're going to lose that unless you start walking. Kim, you and your organization does that better than anybody. But that's exactly the type of thing that we need to be getting across them. So some of it is patient. Some of it is coming from help from places like ADA. But
it's interesting because I'm sorry, it's interesting because Josh, our YouTube producer, actually just said that Joe Rogan said it best, and he calls the fad of Ozempic, the medication that is very popular right now to help patients lose weight, especially, and control their diabetes. He actually called it outsourcing discipline. And I think that sums it up right there.
It's absolutely true. But here's the two facts about it. Number one, Ozempic will cost anybody $400 to $700 a month.
Yeah.
So there's your health equity. You're not getting it to the poorest of the poor that need it. The second thing is, if you speak to physicians, John, I'm sure you know this, the minute they get off the Ozempic and they've lost the weight, guess what? That hunger comes back. Nobody suddenly built, an anti-cheesecake grid in their mouths. They can go right back to all the bad habits again.
100%.
And so it's not a solution.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I know we've got about 30 seconds left, but these GPL-1 agonists, which that's what the Ozempics are, they're fantastic, but you have to use them in conjunction, and you have to have a plan to lose the weight. You have to exercise, and you have to change how you eat, because you're exactly right. You stop the medication, the switch that you turned off flips back on, and you start. So Joe Rogan's absolutely right. We have,
ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, as much as I do not want to interrupt, we have to go to commercial right now. So you'll be listening here on K-Dow with the Heart of Innovation.
AM 1220 KDOW.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And Kim, you gave us a little bit of a cliffhanger during break. You said, I think we should focus on what?
Well, I think we should focus on the learnings from the American Diabetes Association scientific sessions, in which we have both Salih Hendricks, our global P.A.D. advocate for the Global P.A.D. Association, and our board member, Dr. David Alper, that are both there at these sessions trying to help create the change that we all want to see. And before the break, we were talking about just simply the fact that that there's a lot that people need to do to on their own to control the diabetes epidemic and prevent the complications, such as peripheral artery disease, those blocked arteries in the legs, but also we haven't mentioned coronary artery disease, which is also a complication because the plaque builds up in the heart. And Salih brought up something earlier that I do want to, before we jump into that, brought up a really good question earlier, which was, what is the onset of these complications after diagnosis? And I think it's the complications, as Dr. David Alper had told him, it's they're already happening even at the moment of diagnosis. And here's the reason why: because the diagnosis happens after those sugar molecules are already wreaking havoc on the body. Even one sugar molecule could end up scratching those artery walls, leading to that healing response, and the fats, the cholesterol going in to go ahead and either patch that up, or those small LDL particles can eke into those damaged walls that the sugar molecules are leading to, and eke out that artery wall, leading to the hardening of the arteries that we hear about, especially below the knees and into the foot, that are the most complicated to treat. And so, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say real quick that, at the end of the day, I think it's the education of the patient that is going to move this needle. And David, you had mentioned point 2 was increasing ancillary care. That's what they're talking about there, because there's a physician shortage. There's, there are not a ton of docs coming up the pipelines. And so we need these physician extenders to really help engage the patient and kind of create that it takes a village mentality to enact change.
100% correct. 100% correct. You've got, tons of doctors around Boston, Chicago, New York. But if you live in Cupcake, Montana, you're spending half the day just getting to the doctor. And with less and less doctors going into the field, especially primary care, we've got to use the other people that are there, that have the knowledge base. The fact that there's something called the diabetic nurse educator is invaluable, because that's what they're focused on, and they will spend the time with the patient. But once again, it's up to the patient to seek this out and to get it. That's sometimes the breakdown, which is why one of the things ADA is doing is upticking as well their public advertisements. They're going to be out there on your TVs, your radios, your social media, to make more and more awareness. This show does a tremendous job just for that alone.
And I think that it's really, and that's going to help a lot in terms of the pre-diabetes, the before the diagnosis, before the sugar molecules are actually causing the problem, and that's long before the diagnosis as well. I think that those nurse educators can actually, or the PAs or the ancillary staff, right? They can all get in at an earlier level with these patients during their annual exams, long before, even at the teenage level, to help them to understand, what is diabetes? What does just one sugar molecule do to damage those arteries? What's that real impact of just that one extra bite of cake, right? Or that extra carb that you're taking in, an unhealthy carb that, you're not exercising. What's going to happen with that carb if it's not being burned off, right? But that needs to be done much earlier. And I think that AI could actually help with that as well.
Well, you're probably right there, Kim, because AI can help. Think about it. I have two teenagers, actually just 3, because I don't know, she's 21. So anyway, so I've got 3 in the teenage room. I don't know that they've ever thought about what they put into their bodies that, this can cause diabetes for me. They probably don't even know what that term means. So I think AI can educate them. They are on their
Yeah.
phones constantly. Not my
Mhm.
kids, but like, I mean, kids. So I mean, there's a tool there. That is where the proactive starts, because I mean, think about it. I don't recall when I was 16, 17, 18 thinking about, oh, well, geez, these French fries that could cause diabetes and I could lose my
Nope.
leg and have a heart attack. Doesn't even register with me. Didn't register
Mm-mm.
with me, I should say.
But John and Kim and Dr. Alper, it is something that just came to mind now. Advocating for so long for diabetes, how can the global diabetes advocacy on diabetes be helpful to physicians like yourselves in a way of promoting a healthier life? We're looking after ourselves. We see other diabetics. We want to peer support. But how can we do extra work and actually get the approval of doctors to go out there?
That's a great question. I mean, I'm as guilty as any physician out there when I see a patient who is a diabetic. I know they're diabetic, and I say, well, make sure you get your blood glucose levels under control, and that, you know, that hemoglobin A1C that we talk about that gives us that picture of 3 months of prior sugar levels. Get that below 6. I'll see you later. I'll see you next year. Oh, by the way, the stent I put in your leg is open. I'm happy. I'm patting myself on the back. The stent I put in your heart looks good. But again, I'm as guilty as the next guy. So I would love to be able to have a resource that said, okay, I've got an engaged patient here. Go talk to these folks. Get involved with this organization. But I don't know where to turn sometimes.
Because
What about some sort of? Go
sorry,
ahead,
Kim,
Sally.
just on that point, because on one session from yesterday, okay, the topic of if I get up in the morning, my sugar levels, I'm speaking on MMOL levels. Say, for example, if it's at 5.5, it's beautiful, or 6, okay? That's about close on to 173 if you convert it. It is something that I wake up with a beautiful reading, but as soon as I move around the house, my sugar level spikes up. Why? Because the glucose in your muscles, the liver is giving you extra glucose. So it is a topic that came up, the spiking of non-carbs related type of levels that rises. You know, we're not eating, we've got enough, as to say, but those are the topics that came up on sugar rises without eating, and if we do sports, our sugar rises, So if you go to the doctor for a checkup, you're excited, you are rushing to the surgery, to the doctor's consulting rooms. We are stressing, our levels goes up. So these were the topics that we discussed yesterday, on why aren't you looking after your sugar levels? It's high, but they're not something that we just want an answer from physicians on. I think myself and John also spoke about it in previous topics where the empathy comes in from physicians on why did your sugar levels spike? Is it from food
Yeah.
or non-foods?
And coming up right here on the Heart of Innovation, we're going to hear from Dr. David Alper and Dr. John Phillips. Maybe there's an answer to that. So stay with us right here on KDOW and the Heart of Innovation. Don't go away.
1220 KDOW.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
Boy, time flies when you're having fun. We could continue this conversation for at least another hour, perhaps a couple of days. But nonetheless, to answer at least my two cents on that last question from Sally about the spiking, despite what sounds like not really eating, I have adapted I try to, and I'm not perfect, but I adapted the caveman type mentality of eating. when you were a caveman or a woman, when you woke up in the morning, there was probably not much food, maybe some nuts, but then you had to go hunt and kill whatever it is you were going to eat. You most likely ate in the afternoon. You were done eating by probably 4 o'clock. I think there's really something to intermittent fasting, but at the end of the day, you have to eat less and exercise more. David?
Nothing to add to that, John. The only thing, like I said, is, and I've said it several times, people need to accept the fact they have diabetes, to own it, and be ready to work with it. We face a cultural problem because, as we know, diabetes is very strongly inherited. And when you are part of a culture where beans and rice or plantains is a major part of your diet culturally, that makes it difficult to fight it. How many times I amputated toes and feet, and I, felt bad telling the patient, and they would look at me and say, well, now at least my feet will look like grandma's. And I was more upset than they were because it's just part of their culture. And so that education runs into roadblocks with that are really difficult to sometimes overcome with patients. You look at somebody from the Caribbean, you can never eat plantains again. Well, guess what? They're going to find another doctor.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to be, and real quick, I'll let Sallie and Kim comment, but I hate to be a pessimist, but I mean, is this a war we're never going to, do you think we can win this war? Honestly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I do.
Start.
100% no. But can we make it a whole lot better? We know that 85% of the amputations in this country are preventable with early intervention.
Yep.
We have to do a better job of looking early. It's really it's as simple as that. And that statistic has been thrown all over this place for the last 2 days. Sallie, you jump in.
Yep, Sallie.
Actually, in a way that it is in a way that the patient can understand in the layman's terms.
Yeah.
And not actually scaring them away.
Yeah, and that's true. We have to present that in a way that patients, the education about diabetes, not to scare them, because that doesn't work, obviously, even with cigarettes or with drugs. It's like that scare tactic. Maybe it might work for some, but for the majority, they become immune to it. They become numb to it. So we have to do a better job to take people on this journey to eating better, to exercising, to make it cool to eat better, to make it cool to exercise.
Exactly. And I think I was just getting back to that whole teenage and your comment about talking to teenagers. I mean, imagine if you said to, a 16-year-old, oh, you probably shouldn't have that hamburger. That's not good for you. In their mind, well, I'm indestructible. I don't need a seatbelt. I mean, like all these things. So it's just our culture is such that, and I think adults too think, oh, you know what? It's not that really big deal to have a hamburger as a little kid. I mean, and I'm not trying to say no hamburgers, but I'm just thinking like change starts early on. And that's, in my opinion, how we will win this war.
I agree 100%. Well, thank you so much, Dr. John Phillips, but also Salih Hendricks, our Global P.A.D. Association's Global P.A.D. advocate, and Dr. David Alper, our board member, both live at the American Diabetes Association's scientific sessions in Orlando, Florida. We appreciate you bringing this discussion to the forefront. Certainly more discussions to be had. We look forward to seeing so much more from the ADA in the coming year and helping to create the change we all want to see, which is lower diabetes and lower amputations. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Amen to that, Kim.
Thank you.